This is the 3D Viewmaster Showtime Emergency, an NBC television series. Viewmaster Reel 1. Picture 1. The fire was in one of Los Angeles' sprawling warehouse districts, and Battalion 7 was first on the scene. To rescue Squad 51, closely following the leading engine, came the command, Squad 51, make the hydrant. The squad pulled to a halt in front of the building, from which black smoke billowed ominously. Leaping to the ground, firemen John Gage and Roy DeSoto grabbed two 2.5-inch hose lines from the engine and secured them to the hydrant. This done, they raced to Captain Stanley's post in time to hear a word shouted from the roof of the burning structure. Captain Bailey fell through the skylight. He strapped on a mezzanine above the office. Captain Stanley nodded at DeSoto and Gage. Get up there, you two. Do what you can. I'll send pry bars and extra ladders pronto. Picture 2. Scrambling to the roof, they found a hole below which they could make out, through the smoke and flames, a jumble of debris. From beneath it protruded a man's head and arms. The fire was spreading toward him. A ladder was passed up to them. Quickly lowering it through the hole, they started down, DeSoto first. Gage yelled to the other firemen, "Too tight for masks. We'll change it. Rush those pry bars and give us a cover spray." In the inferno below they found a fallen man, unconscious, atop a stack of crated machinery, up which the flames were licking hungrily. He was pinned beneath collapsed timbers and other debris. Have though they would, they could neither raise the timbers nor pull the inert man free. The heat grew ever more unbearable, and the smoke tore at their unprotected throats. Picture 3. Interminable moments later, faces appeared at the hole above, along with a hose nozzle. Quickly they were drenched in a spray of water. The pry bars followed, and the pair attacked the wreckage with controlled violence. But it still wasn't enough. K-12, shouted Gage, and soon one of the little power saws was lowered. Moments later, DeSoto, tugging at the fallen man's shoulder, gave a victorious whoop. He's free. Picture 4. The man was free, but none of them was out of danger yet. "Litter!" yelled Gage to the hole above. Thanks to the speed and efficiency of the team outside, a Stokes litter was ready, and down it came at the end of a rope. A sizzling sound told the rescuers that flames had reached the grease in the crated machinery below their feet, and they worked with desperate speed to slide the litter under their unconscious comrade and lash him to it. Within seconds, the tensely waiting firefighters above heard the welcome cry from below. "Take it up! Take it up!" Picture 5. As the litter was lowered to the ground, Captain Stanley threw a keen glance at Gage and DeSoto and ordered them to follow the litter. "Do what you can for him and call for help if you need it." While DeSoto stripped Captain Bailey's coat off and made him as comfortable as possible, Gage flipped the biophone switch and spoke into the transmitter. "Rampart emergency. This is 51. Victim unconscious but coming out of it. Smoke inhalation. Probably fracture of right femur. Possible internals. Request instructions. Back came the voice of Nurse Dixie McCall. 10-4-51. Follow usual emergency procedures and stand by. Next voice Dr. Early's. Gripping the injured man's wrist, DeSoto closed his eyes in concentration as he counted the pulse beats, his ears tuning out the tumult all around him. At the same time his throat contracted in sympathy as the captain retched and groaned with the agony of returning consciousness. Picture 6. Miles away at Rampart Emergency, Nurse Dixie was soon joined at the biophone by Dr. Early, veteran of medical emergencies beyond counting. It's squad 51, she told him. They've got a fractured femur, possible internals and smoke. The doctor nodded. I'll talk to them, but surgery on alert. I'll have them rush their man in. After speeding the sufferer to the hospital in response to the doctor's crisp instructions, the two had time to relax and unwind a bit as they wheeled back toward the station. Suddenly, Gage straightened, struck by a heavy thought. Hey, Roy, you reckon they might have delivered it by now? Our own private fire engine. Picture 7. Sure enough, once they had secured their equipment and cleaned up, Gage and DeSoto, with teammate Marco Lobbes tagging along, hurried to the lot behind the station to find their purchase, had indeed been delivered. It was the wreck of a fire engine, vintage of about 1923. You mean you baboons paid good money for this? Demanded Lobbes. Yup, Gage told him. $40 a piece. Time we get through fixing her up, she'll be worth 40 times that. She'll be the star of the Frontier Day Parade. Put in Gage and the Firemen's Olympics. You peasants will be begging for a ride, DeSoto predicted with a wink at his partner. Viewmaster Reel 2. Picture 1. A light plane had crashed at the lip of a bluff overlooking the Pacific. Minutes later, Squad and Engine 51 were on the scene, ready for anything, including the ever-present danger of fire. The plane had grazed a parked car, shearing off a wing, flipped and slammed into the precipitous hillside about 200 feet below the fuel parking area. First sound to assail the ears of Squad's crew when they switched off the motor and leaped down was the wail of a hurt and frightened child. Picture 2. Smoke rose ominously from the plane's engine. As the firemen went into action, Gage called a warning. Watch it! A hard breath'll roll this plane over. DeSoto reached the plane first and looked inside. He grabbed the biophone. A man and a woman in the front seat, he told Rampart. Covered with blood, either dead or unconscious. Little girl in the back seat, conscious. The child, about 8 years old, was frantically calling over and over, Mommy, Daddy. Forgetting about fire danger or anything else, DeSoto reached for the child. His voice was calm, soothing. You just take it easy, honey. Don't even move. We're going to take care of you and your folks too. What's your name? Angie, was the reply in a strangled voice. Okay, Angie, don't move now. Here we go. Picture 3. DeSoto circled the small waist with one arm and plucked her out like a check straw from its pile. Gotcha, he said as he handed her to Gage and reached for the stretcher. Now you're going to go for a ride in this funny little basket, safe as a church. as soon as Angie, who bore no evidence of serious injury, was on her way up in the hands of others. The squad team quickly turned to her parents. While DeSoto ripped upon a package of pressure bandages, Gage made a quick examination of the victims and thrust out one hand for a bandage. "It's too late for him," he said grimly. "Here we can save, but get on the phone, we need help." Beside them, Kelly was hosing down the smoking engine. Picture 4. The tension eased a bit when Stoker had secured the precariously perched wreck with ropes, while DeSoto relayed messages into the biophone. At Rampart, Nurse Dixie and Dr. Brackett made note of every word. "Respiration 8, pulse 65, pressure 150/70. Breaking in, the doctor ordered curtly, 51, begin an IV with Ringer's lactate. Working with the smooth efficiency of long practice, the rescuers soon had Angie's mother out of the wreckage and on her way up the hill, ready for the dash by ambulance to the hospital. Only then did they turn their attention to the unwelcome task of bringing up the body of the father. Picture 5. Because they just couldn't stay away, Gage and DeSoto were soon on hand at Rampart Emergency, bombarding Nurse Dixie with questions. She was frowning, shaking her head. The skull series showed up normal, but there's something that bothers Dr. Brackett and Dr. Early too. I think they suspect a temporal lobe herniation. Gage gave a low whistle, and DeSoto sucked in his breath sharply. Both were thinking of Angie. Poor little girl. DeSoto said, she just can't lose them both. How do you tell a child a thing like that? Dixie sighed deeply. It's my job to tell her. The police haven't found any relatives yet. She squared her shoulders. So I might as well get it over with. Picture 6. It was just as hard a job as she had thought, and she was having lunch on the cafeteria terrace. And Dixie plunged right in. I know you're a brave girl, honey, she said, because you've proved it. Now I have to tell you something unhappy. The doctors tried very hard, but your daddy was hurt so badly they couldn't make him better. The child's eyes welled with tears as the cruel fact began to sink in, and Dixie had to take her in her arms. Forcing into her voice a note of confidence she was a long way from feeling, she went on talking. But they're going to make your mommy all right. They're fixing her up right now, but it takes a lot of time. And you'll just have to go on being brave and very, very patient. Picture 7. Dixie had little further time to comfort Angie because minutes later she was summoned to duty in surgery. It was the only hope for Angie's mother, the doctors had decided. For a full 24 hours after the operation, it was nip and tuck with the plane crash victim, but at least consciousness returned, and within the beginning of painful recollection, the realization that something terrible had happened. It fell to the lot of Dr. Early to tell his patient that her husband was dead. A mild sedation cushioned the shock of the news, but as it wore off, the agonizing truth gripped her and she sobbed uncontrollably, crying out that without him she had no desire to live. Now it was up to Dixie to deal with the situation. Viewmaster Reel 3, Picture 1. getting a firm grip on the frantic woman's hand. Dixie spoke firmly but consolingly. "You must not excite yourself," she said. "You've undergone a very serious operation and you must rest and recover." Anne's sobs appeared to subside a little, and Dixie quickly pressed her advantage. "And you've got to remember, even if your husband is gone, you have a great deal to live for. You have a little girl who has been very brave for a long time now. She's waiting outside, and I think she deserves to come in here and see her mummy with a smile on her face. Don't you think so, too?" Picture 2. Anne did think so, and though it cost her a monumental effort, she did manage a creditable smile for her daughter. Frightened at first at the sight of her mother's swollen and discolored face swathed in bandages, and she was soon reassured by the smile and began chattering animatedly as she told about a fireman who had pulled her from the plane and given her a ride high up in the air inside a funny basket. Dixie smiled to herself as she tiptoed out of the room. Anne was doing her job as a mother now. She was going to be all right. Picture 3. Meanwhile, at Station 51, life was following its usual hectic course. While Angie was being reunited with her mother, Squad 51's crew was racing out into Lake Castaic aboard a harbor patrol craft. A harbor patrolman clued them in as they went. Man's in bad shape, twisted up in his aluminium boat, hit by a wild speedboater. Wife was with him and we got her out, but afraid to move the man. Ambulance is on the way. Nodding, Gage and DeSoto checked their gear, pry bars, key, K-12 power saw, medical equipment, the biophone. The scene that greeted them as the patrol boat halted a few minutes later was even worse than they had been led to expect. Swathed like a mummy with twisted aluminium, the victim was conscious but in severe pain. Hanging over the side of the speedboat to which the wreckage was lashed to keep it afloat was his wife. She was weeping and trying to comfort him. A float had been rigged beside the wreckage. Kneeling on it, DeSoto began his examination. Picture 4. While patrolmen worked to rig a rope harness to raise the boat, Gage made contact with Rampart Base, getting Dixie first, then Dr. Early. DeSoto called up to Gage. "Possible fractured ribs and legs. Lot of blood. Request an IV." In a moment, Early's voice came back. "Go ahead with IV." DeSoto had begun the IV when suddenly the injured man began struggling to sit upright. His breathing was hoarse, labored. "Chest," he gasped. "Can't breathe." DeSoto struggled to hold him upright while he listened to his lungs with his stethoscope. "Pulmonary edema," he said. Gage thrust the elder head at him and spoke sharply into the phone. "Pulmonary edema. Administering oxygen." While DeSoto went on working with the victim, Gage seized the K-12 saw and went into action. The man had to be freed, and time was running out. Picture 5. The snarl of the little saw drowned out all other sounds as Gage, calculating each cut with infinite care, began the job of cutting the victim free. Multiplying the difficulty many times was the fact that most of the cuts had to be made underwater. Soon he was drenched with sweat and bone weary, but he never paused. Gage cut his hands repeatedly as he seized each newly severed segment of aluminium and bent it back and away from the mangled leg of the man. Minutes passed. Then the tense onlookers gasped with relief as Gage yelled, "It's loose! It's free!" Instantly he dropped the saw and leaped to his partner's side to help administer injections and dress the mangled leg. Next move was for the patrol boat crew to lower the Stokes stretcher. As DeSoto and Gage eased the man into it, they observed that his breathing was easier. Soon the stretcher was settled in the harbor patrol boat, which headed for shore. Picture 6. As the boat pulled up to the dock, Gage called Rampart again. "Coming in to shore now," he told Dixie. "Ambulance is waiting for us. So tell Doc he'll have a new patient pronto. Now, if you're ready, we'll transmit the EKG. Fire when ready, Admiral," came Dixie's reply. "But first a bit of news. Angie's mommy's going to be okay." The news was a shot in the arm to the weary rescue team, and they agreed that, right after supper, they would work on the old fire engine. Picture 7. With the captain's permission, they wheeled the engine inside and before bedtime were off to a good start. As they took a last look at the old machine, DeSoto said reflectively, "I know in her day she was the best there was new, fast, up to date. And the guys were proud. Put in Gage to make the runs in her. Sure, and think how many must have worked on her." They were silent, each following his own thought. It was Gage who brought them back together, and some of the guys who went out with her never made it back. DeSoto had the last word, speaking not to his partner, but to the old engine. "You deserve a lot of respect, old girl, and that's what you're going to get from Squad 51.